One of my favorite spiritual practices is hiking. It doesn't have to be a spiritual practice, it just is for me. I like the integration of body, mind, and spirit, especially a hike up to some vista or viewpoint. Opportunity to contemplate, to ponder, to have new perspective, literally and internally. I have an experience of mostly hiking solo, and this came of practical necessity. I'm a pastor, you noticed. But so the rhythms of my life have been very different often than my friends or various hiking groups. They often will set up the greatest hikes on Sunday mornings, or there's weekend outings. And I usually can't do that. I have weekends only when I have vacation time in the traditional sense. So I often, when I move somewhere, I'll join a hiking group so I'll learn about where the cool hikes are, even if I can't go on them. There are also trails that more people are often on. So there are some benefits in hiking solo. You don't have to put up with other people. Right? The needs or desires or scheduling or the various pacing, right? If they're going, especially for me, early on, too fast. Like, is this a race? I would hate that, where I feel like I just want to look at things. So there is that piece, a sense of being free of that, or if you don't want to have conversation. So there's different aspects of feeling sort of this freedom of going it alone. At the same time, there are risks and losses in going it alone. I miss then the company of other people, the opportunity to connect in relationship or friendship. Also, what happens if you fall? Hypothetically. Or get lost. Anyone hear about the guy up in Flagstaff from New York who had to be rescued not just once, but twice because he wandered off the trail 2 different days? Now, cell phones have helped mitigate some of the risk of hiking solo. But before cell phones, I still did it. But I would leave a note for my family about where I was going and when I thought I'd be back. And so years ago, I remember this one particular time, I drove 1 hour east of Seattle into Snoqualmie Pass. And on a Tuesday, my normal day off at that time, where I would hike on one of my favorite trails to a place called Snow Lake. And so I was enjoying, it was a summer day, because you don't do these hikes in the winter in Seattle. And smell of cedar trees and birds, and you could hear water going through the canyon. And then I get to this point about 2 miles into the trail where there's switchbacks that go up, exposed, so it's hotter, at least by Seattle standards. And right as I'm in those switchbacks, the most difficult part of the trail, a big black fly decided that was the time to start buzzing my head. And it just wouldn't stop. And this is years ago, and it's still a vivid memory. And it was really helping me understand the origin of the phrase, "quit bugging me." And so at one point, in great frustration, I flailed my arms at it and proceeded to knock my own glasses off my head. Now I wear contacts. And they went flying, and so I'm nearsighted. But I could, if they were on the path in front of me, around me, I would have seen them, at least glinting in the sun, and I couldn't. And so most likely they had gone into, there's a steep slope on the switchback full of shrubs, growth, and they're probably down there. But I couldn't see them. Now, I could see well enough that on my own I could navigate back down the trail, but what I couldn't do was safely drive an hour back to Seattle. And so I felt stuck. I didn't know what to do. My heart started racing. I felt this panic, and that I was stupid for hiking alone. So in life, including the spiritual life, it can seem good sometimes to have it be a solo journey. That there's a sense of, well, there's freedom in going it alone. And I know right now I'm preaching to the choir, literally, you're right here, but right, community who's gathered together. But there are temptations and ideas about, like, it's easier going it alone. There's a certain freedom. You don't have to put up with other people. Their various musical tastes, or their sense, or their chatter, or ideas that you don't already like, right? You don't have to, the spiritual life could be much like entertainment life, where I just have my news feed and my social media that, of course, it's been attuned to my likes and interests, or my cable channel that will never challenge my assumptions, right? So, but to gather and to have the spiritual journey be together with other people, well, we might run into things that we don't already agree with, or that could challenge or stretch us, and so that could feel uncomfortable. And so there can be this desire, I'll protect myself, and we might want to go it alone. At the same time, though, there are losses in only going it alone. We miss the opportunity to be in relationship with other amazing people. We miss the opportunity to be challenged in ways that might stretch us and grow us in our life and our understanding of God and what we're here to live. And then at times we might end up feeling lost and afraid and can't see the way very clearly. And that's harder when we're alone. Well, Jesus is really clear, both in what he teaches and what he lives, that the spiritual journey is not a solo one. Now, don't hear me too quickly. There's solitude, right? There's the spiritual practices of solitude, but even when Jesus is off on his own, he's still seeking to be gathered to or connected with God. It's not just doing his own thing. He's seeking in solitude to still be connected, to be gathered to God. So Jesus preaches, teaches, lives that the spiritual journey is one about being connected with God and other people. And in our gospel reading today, the story starts out with some Pharisees who come to Jesus and say, Herod is out to kill you. Herod is the sort of Jewish puppet king placed in his role by the Roman Empire. And Jesus is going to be killed by Herod, at least that's the threat, because Jesus has been what? Healing people? Loving people? Touching the untouchable? Jesus is offering what is good and connected with what his whole faith has been about. And Herod's supposed to be approving of that, but Herod's afraid of that. It threatens his power, it threatens his control. So Herod wants Jesus gone. And the story starts with the ultimate expression, the arc of what going solo gets you. That alienated from God, from other people, Herod becomes afraid. Herod feels threatened by other people and powers, and so Herod must engage in violence and want to destroy. That this is the ultimate arc the story's wanting us to see of the solo-only journey. And that's where it goes, right? Whether it's King Herod or Vladimir Putin attacking Ukraine, feeling threatened, wanting to hold on to power. Or state legislatures wanting to make sure that certain people don't get too easy access to voting. Or that there are people who might be uncomfortable having their children talk about gender or sexuality, so let's have people sue each other. We're so afraid. And so we do those kind of things to control, to manage, that then do violence. But Jesus is wanting to make it clear, in case people are like, yeah, that Herod, stupid Herod. He's like, well, all y'all do this too. Like it can happen to any of us and all of us. So he starts talking about his own people, which include the people he's with. And he says, though, again and again, we get in these places where we try to go solo. We try to do it on our own. And we're disconnected from God and from each other. The whole thing we were supposed to be about was being gathered to God and to each other so we would bless all the nations of the world, that we would be a light to the nations, that we would show ways of justice and generosity, creativity and beauty. That's who we are, what we're supposed to do. But then we try to do it on our own, and then we get afraid, and we live from scarcity, and we start to push, and we start to shove, and we get entrenched in our isms and our injustices. And then when God sends people who say, hey, turn around, this is destructive, this is bad, we're so used to doing it our own way that we're even afraid of the good news, the good word. And so you people, my people, we have killed the prophets, beaten them up, instead of hearing the invitation to turn around. And Jesus is deeply sad as he talks about that. There's another story, we'll hear it a little later in this Lenten season in Holy Week, where Jesus, he's coming into Jerusalem, and he crests this hill and he sees the city. And Jesus starts talking and thinking about the same things he's talking and thinking about here, about the ways that the city that's to be a light to the world has killed light and love and healing and hope. And Jesus cries. He starts sobbing. He's deeply sad for all the ways that we live afraid and disconnected, where we try to protect ourselves, but then we hurt ourselves and hurt others. But then Jesus responds out of this place of sadness, of grief, of calling it out. He doesn't say, and now you get what you deserve. Jesus doesn't say, push you away, shame on you. Jesus says, here's what I want to do. Here's what I long to do. I long to, like a mother hen, to stretch out my wings and gather you like a mother hen gathers her little chicks together. Jesus speaks with such love and tenderness to people who've lived in fear and scarcity and violence. But I want to gather you in because I know the gathering in will help heal you and center you and turn you around so you can also then be sent out to live and move and have your being in ways that are just and beautiful and loving. And Jesus, he's talking to an agrarian community. Any of you grew up with chickens? Just curious. Yeah. I didn't, but I've seen them. I don't mean just the grocery store. I mean the walking around chickens. But I remember talking about this in a Bible study with someone who was a farmer and grown up on a farm. And he says, oh, yeah, they all would have seen this. What happens, there's those little fluffy yellow chicks, right? And the mother hen, and then a threat comes in. Often a predator, right? And in that time and place, often a fox. And by the way, it's not a coincidence that Jesus calls Herod, did you catch the name he called him? Fox. So sometimes we're prey, but sometimes we turn into predators. Anyway, the threat comes in, and the mother hen, they'd see the hen stretch out the wings, and the little fluffy chicks, right? They come on in for safety, to be gathered. And what would happen if a little fluffy chick said, oh no, I'm good? Right? Oh, you're trying to control me, inviting me to come in. Well, that little chick would become fox food. And Jesus uses this image because it connects with another idea that he'll share and summarizes this way. He says, those who try to save their life, meaning that self-protection, just do it on your own life, they lose it. It's no life at all. And so Jesus is, in the story, in this image, saying, be gathered. Be gathered. We need God. We need each other. That's where the healing is. That's where the strength is. And of course, the chicks don't just stay forever under the wings, right? They also get sent out. This rhythm of being gathered in and sent out, gathered in and sent out. And the psalmist is talking about these same ideas. The psalmist, of course, like any human being, knows the temptation to just go it alone, to just try to have DIY, do-it-yourself life. He knows that. But the psalmist also sees that the world is a mess. Did you hear all the things he's labeling? It's like he read the headlines today, right? Same old story. Different characters, different actors, but the same old kind of chaos and violence. And the psalmist is saying, I can't go it alone. I can't do this alone. I need to be gathered to you, O God. Hear me. And I need my people. Hear me. Let's be gathered. And then the psalmist sings that first line, the Lord, God, is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? It doesn't mean he doesn't feel fear, but he's not going to live the fear. That's in being gathered, that there is then the courage and the strength to go live it, to go live what is just and true and healing and hopeful. And he goes, come on, gather with me. And you know, this is one of the reasons, well, it's really the primary reason, or should be, why we have faith communities. And why faith communities devote so many resources to being gathered. Whether we do it online or in person, but being gathered. I know I was one time in a budget meeting, it was a different church, where someone said, well, shouldn't we just send all of our resources to other charities? And that, right, we're supposed to make a difference. Absolutely, absolutely, make a transformational difference in the world. But they were suggesting that we didn't need to worship or sing or do all the other things that we do. But then there's this image, if we track with Jesus, that's like, let's just send all the fluffy little chicks out into the world. Chomp, 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 right? We need, though, and we have to also be gathered. We need to get centered and connected with God and each other so we can go do the work. And that's why It was almost 2 years ago where I remember it was the equivalent of this Sunday 2 years ago, like, oh, we're going to have to shut things down, for 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Remember that? But there was a sense of, but we still have to find ways to gather. This is essential. And we did it. Pre-recorded Zoom. And God bless so many of you who are like, Zoom? Wasn't that a show on PBS? But you did it because we recognize, and maybe some of us more than ever, know how important it is for any ways that we can be gathered to God and to each other, because it can be a mess. There's a lot of pain and suffering and struggle, and so we choose to be gathered so that we can be sent to make a difference. As you probably know, I did not stay stranded in the Cascade Mountains east of Seattle. So as I'm there and my heart's racing, at some point it occurs to me that I could pray. And maybe this is comforting to you to know that your pastor didn't think of praying first. Right? Because the first thing that comes to mind, problem solving, figure it out, just take care of it. And then when I kind of surrendered that I couldn't, oh, right. So I chose to be gathered to God. All right, God, help me know what to do. And I actually intentionally took some deeper breaths, and I tried to be quiet. And then there was this consistent thought that came to mind, my sense of God still speaking, which was just stay there where you are and then ask for help. So wait and ask for help. My two least favorite things in the world. Wait, ask for help. Ugh. But I knew it was truth. I've learned to trust the voice of the Good Shepherd. And so I did. And after about only 10 or 15 minutes, I heard voices, people coming up the switchbacks. Blurs to me, but I could hear them. And first thought was like, my saviors. And my second thought was, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to tell them I knocked my own glasses off my head. And I didn't want to do it. It's sort of like when you're choking and, are you all right? Oh, it's just my own saliva, right? It's embarrassing when we trip ourselves up, when we hurt ourselves. And I didn't want to tell that story. But what else could I do? I was vulnerable. I needed help. So as they're coming closer, still fuzzy people to me, I take the deep breath and I'm like, hello? And then one of the people says, hi, Michael. The angel knew me by name. And his name was David Dixon. He was a member of the Congregational Church on Mercer Island, United Church of Christ, where I was the pastor. And David is a psychiatrist, normally be working on a Tuesday, but he'd taken the day off because he had two friends visiting, taking them on his favorite hike to Snow Lake. And one of the guys, I'd explain what happened. He's like, oh yeah. And he scrambles down, he finds my glasses in a shrub and returns them to me. I put them on. And then they ask, are you headed up still to the lake or headed back down? And I was tempted to say, just down. But I had heard the message for me that day, be gathered. I said, I'm going up. They said, you want to join us? I said, yes. So we know the results of the way of just going it alone. We know the results of fear and scarcity. We know the racism, transphobia, homophobia, injustices. We know the way of the solo journey. And so here today, the good news that God does not say, well, you get what you deserve. God says, come on back, be gathered to me, to each other, like that mother hen nestled in there for healing and sustenance and clarity and strength to then be sent into a world that needs good news, shared and lived by us. Jesus shows us the way. Come, be gathered. Come and see. Amen.